When it comes to staying healthy, 50 isn't the new 30. The rules of food and exercise have changed along with our biology. I'm Ruth, and as a health coach working with women over 50, I've seen 5 important truths that improve our health. Without them, you can waste time working hard and getting nowhere, or worse, actively setting your health back. By the end of this video, you'll know what to focus on to start making progress that keeps you healthier well beyond your 60s and 70s. Let's start with what's changed, because understanding the biology helps us understand what we need to change and why. After menopause, we need to consider 4 biological shifts that occur simultaneously. Number 1, when we get a rise in blood glucose, we get a rise in the hormone insulin. This binds to insulin receptors on the cells and triggers a chemical cascade. This makes receptors called GLUT4 receptors move from within the cell to its surface. The GLUT4 receptors are what allow glucose to enter the cell from the bloodstream, where it can be used for energy. When we get older, this process becomes less efficient as our cells age. The GLUT4 receptors don't move to the cell surface as easily, so less glucose gets taken out of the bloodstream into the cells, which then makes the pancreas produce more insulin to compensate. And this is how insulin resistance develops. The cells have become resistant to the effects of insulin. By the way, if you'd like a whole video on insulin resistance in the post-menopause, let me know in the comments. Number 2, so why does insulin resistance develop? Well, contrary to popular belief, it's not from glucose spikes. Transient spikes in glucose are part of our normal biology, and insulin spikes are triggered by other things as well, notably protein. You just can't measure them as easily. It's a prolonged rise in blood glucose that we need to worry about, because that's what causes the damage, not a transient blip. But that prolonged rise is the symptom, not the cause. The cause of insulin resistance is fat, specifically fat in the wrong place. In our body, we've got 2 main types of fat. So fat under the skin, which is called subcutaneous fat, and fat underneath our bones and muscles deep within our abdominal and chest cavities called visceral fat. This visceral fat secretes inflammatory compounds called adipokines that contribute to the development of insulin resistance, which is why weight loss, even on a high carbohydrate diet, improves insulin sensitivity, as illustrated by the landmark Diet Fits trial. The problem we have as older women is that the decline in estrogen means that the pattern of fat distribution in our body changes, and we're more likely to develop this deep visceral belly fat, making insulin resistance more likely. Number 3, muscle loss makes everything worse. So muscle loss starts in our 30s, and when our muscle declines, our body composition shifts. So less percentage lean tissue means a greater proportion of fatty tissue, including visceral fat. And more on muscle in a moment. Number 4, dyslipidemia is the medical word for raised lipids, so fats in the blood, and this goes hand in hand with insulin resistance as we age. Declining estrogen is associated with a rise in a particular pattern of blood lipids, specifically low HDL cholesterol, high LDL cholesterol, and high triglycerides. And this pattern is associated with an increased risk of heart disease. There is a wealth of evidence to support this, from observational studies to randomized controlled trials to Mendelian randomization studies, which look at how genetic variations affect conditions. So this quadruple metabolic threat, so insulin resistance, fat redistribution, reduced muscle mass and dyslipidemia, means that our bodies are operating under different rules now, which, for truth number 1, means that unfortunately we've got less wiggle room when it comes to our diet. We simply can't get away with eating as we did in our 30s. We need to prioritise what the research says supports our long-term health, so protein, fibre and unsaturated fats, and minimising refined carbohydrates and saturated fat. And if you're enjoying this video, you'll probably enjoy my weekly newsletter. It comes out every Friday, and I usually focus in depth on one aspect of that week's video. I'll put the link to sign up in the description below. Now for truth number 2, I want to focus on one of those 4 biological shifts. The the one most amenable to change, and the one that does the most heavy lifting. Literally, sorry, that was such a terrible pun. Maintaining and building muscle after 50 is one of the best things you can do for your health, and it goes well beyond aesthetics. Your metabolism, your bone density, your independence in the decades ahead, well, they all depend on it. The process of menopause itself doesn't tank our metabolism. I've made a whole video about this, and I'll link it in the description. What does directly impact our metabolism is muscle. The more muscle we have, the more energy we burn, even at rest. I'm being attacked by a fly. Building muscle, and indeed any activity using muscle, including walking, improves insulin sensitivity. So using muscle makes those GLUT4 receptors in muscle cells travel to the cell surface where they can take glucose out of the bloodstream. Muscle also significantly impacts our strength and balance, and building muscle helps to strengthen our joints, and it stimulates bone growth, helping to prevent osteoporosis. So we know it's important, but I hear you, strength work is boring and I don't want to go to the gym. And I agree, building muscle takes repetition and time. And yes, I find going to the gym boring too. I've had to get over it and learn to love it because I've got a very strong family history of type 2 diabetes in people with a normal body weight. And that's a big motivator, let me tell you. So here are 5 tips for you. Number 1, tie it to a reward. I use it as my unadulterated podcast and audiobook time. Put on my headphones and lose myself. Number 2, I view it as a project. I call it Project Deltoid because I want to grow one, ideally 2. Viewing it as a project ties it to the process, and more of that in a moment. Number 3, find the right gym. Yes, some are dominated by packs of sweaty gym bros, but not all, and you can often find a quieter time of day to go. One member of my Fed and Focus community has learnt to love the gym by picking one aimed specifically at the over 40s. Number 4, or ditch the gym altogether. It's absolutely possible to build muscle from home. And number 5, ignore that you have to lift heavy or there's no point crowd. Yes, you do get more muscle growth with a heavier weight, but this really good research study showed that you get muscle growth with lighter loads and you get muscle growth compared with doing nothing from doing just one session a week. As long as you are challenging your body and progressing, it's doing something. And don't worry about getting bulky. That is not going to happen. Building muscle takes work, and I wish I was more bulky. Muscle After 50 is our health insurance. And once you see it that way, I promise you it boosts the motivation to pick up the dumbbells. And if you've never done it before, that's fine. Anything is better than nothing. The best time to start strength exercise was 20 years ago, but 20 years ago we didn't realise how important it was. The second best time is today. Bloody hell, that is cheesy, but it's true. But truth number 3 is where some women get tripped up. Because the natural response to wanting results is to push harder, and after 50 that's the wrong move. Now, before I talk about recovery, I want to address something I see constantly on social media. The idea that postmenopausal women shouldn't do cardio because it spikes cortisol and causes belly fat. This is not supported by the evidence. Cortisol belly isn't a thing. Normal physiological cortisol spikes, the kind you get from any exercise, strength or cardio, don't cause belly fat, and cardio is genuinely important for heart and lung health at any age. However, there is a kernel of truth buried in there, and it's this. Chronic stress, the kind that keeps stress hormones elevated in the long term, does mess with your metabolism. It increases cravings, it impairs your immune system, and it can work against muscle growth. So the real message isn't avoid cardio, it's don't chronically overdo exercise without adequate recovery. Which brings me to the most underrated tool in your arsenal after 50, rest and sleep. Our body repairs itself and muscle grows in stage 3 sleep, which is deep sleep. There are 2 types of sleep, REM, so rapid eye movement sleep, where we dream, and non-REM sleep, which has got 3 stages. Stage 1 is the lightest and stage 3 is deep sleep. Deep sleep happens mostly in the first half of the night, so going to bed earlier gives you more of it, even if your total sleep time stays the same. So that extra gym session on poor sleep can cost more than it gives, and this is why. Recovery after exercise is slower the older we get, and we're more likely to injure ourselves. The reduced estrogen at menopause has a negative effect on our tendons and ligaments. Muscles, they repair themselves quickly, tendons and ligaments do not. So when we decide to go hard or go home with exercise, it can backfire. The women making real progress have stopped pushing harder and started recovering smarter, which means rest days and a good night's sleep. Effort still matters, and we do still have to put the work in. And whilst recovery is where the progress happens for everyone, it's even more important as we age. So treating sleep and stress as the optional extras is the thing most likely to undo progress. So make time for downtime. So now you understand what your body needs, but there's a trap that we're all prone to for truth number 4. And it's the one the diet industry is built on: the instant fix. When we try hard, we want to see results quickly, but that comes at a cost. I'll explain. When we lose weight, we lose fat. Now, the body tries hard to hang on to muscle, but a crash diet will mean we burn muscle too. It's why people lose muscle on the GLP-1 drugs like Mounjaro. It's not the drug itself, it's the speed of weight loss. Plus, when you cut too many calories, the body actively fights back by slowing down your resting metabolism and ramping up your hunger hormone ghrelin. It's called metabolic adaptation, and it's what drives weight regain, leading to the risk of yo-yo dieting. The official term is weight cycling, and as well as being bad for our body, it's bad for our mental health, which is why a lot of women over 50 come to the conclusion that they are done with diets and they want to focus instead on eating for health, which I thoroughly approve of. And circling back to recovery time with exercise, the risk of going too hard with the strength building risks an injury that could set you back months and reverse those sweet, sweet gains. Now, I know this to my cost. I've had a frozen shoulder rather than an injury, but any arm muscle I did build disappeared, and I've now got a left arm as weak as Bambi's legs. Impatience is the enemy here. Every quick fix has a cost, and after 50, that cost is either the muscle you just spent months building or the risk of weight cycling and the associated psychological toll, or both. We need to start low and go slow. So if quick fixes are out and the timeline is longer than you'd like, the question becomes, what are you really building towards? And that is answered by truth number 5. So shift the lens from next month to the longer term. And I argue that the plan doesn't get harder, it gets simpler. And I'll run through my thinking. The problem with following the tortoise and not the hare is that we get bored. We want the rapid result to boost our motivation, and if that doesn't happen, it can trigger all or nothing thinking, and we conclude that we may as well give up. Humans aren't great at delayed gratification. So how do we fix this quirk of human nature? The question is to ask, what do I want to be doing at 75 or 85? Independence, mobility, energy, come up with a complete picture of what this looks like for you. When you shift the lens from months to the next 20 or 30 years, the plan actually gets easier because the long game makes individual weeks less high stakes. The quick fixes, the 6-week shreds, the crash diet, statistically they don't work. The results don't last. The evidence shows that the majority of weight lost on a diet goes back on within 5 years. We need to focus on consistency over intensity. To minimise delayed gratification, treat your health as a skill you are building. A project a bit like my deltoids. It's a cliche, but focus on the journey, not the destination, which is exactly what we do in my community. So we cannot ignore the fact that our biology has changed. We need to think about how we eat and how we move in a way that's sustainable. Focus on building for the next 30 years, not the next 3 months. Long-term health, not a number on the scales. You're building something that lasts, the future you, and that changes the whole feeling of the process. And that's the mindset shift I want for you. But a reset for healthy aging can feel overwhelming, leading to decision paralysis where you aren't sure where to start. So watch this video next for 5 tiny habits you can implement straight away to get you moving forwards.